Hey Nippers, it's me, Wild Neptune. So, you probably heard that we were going to be getting an LD Selector to go along with the official global launch of the game. Global, in this case, meaning China, Japan, and all those other regions that are not yet in the game, which is weird, I know, because a lot of us are actually used to it being the opposite, where like NA is the global launch, but that's not true here. We actually got it first, and a lot of creators, I think, a lot of players, guessed that there would be an LD selector to go along with this launch. The only question would be if all the other regions would get it too, and the answer we now know is yes. So in this video, we'll go over what units I think you should pick depending on your plans, which ones you might want to avoid, and a general breakdown on each of the units very, very quickly. Anyway, let's go. Okay, so right to the tier list here. Not really a tier list per se, just kind of categorizations of what the units are for, except for the top and bottom tiers, as obviously Lily, I think if you play this game for any period amount of time, you will know is the best unit to pick up. So if you don't have her, you should get her. And well, that's it. I guess that's the video for you. You also cannot get Yelly because Yelly is going to be the starting LD banner for the China slash rest of Asia region. And like we had Messiah as our banner, they will have Yelly, so they will not allow them, or us, I'm assuming too, to get her. Which really leaves these other units here if you already have Lily, and which one do you want to pick. So I'll talk about Lily too, but I've broken down into 3 other tiers. Flexible, this means units that can be used in both PvE and PvP to relatively high or even very, very high levels. In fact, both these units are extremely strong in both PvP and some PvE also. We have PvP. These units, again, you can use them somewhat for some PvE in certain situations. However, mainly they'll be focused on PvP. And then you have PvE here, which is only Shadow Sonya, which is going to be a unit that's mainly used for PvE, and unfortunately for her is a joke in PvP because she doesn't really do anything in the format. But like I said, we'll talk about all these units in a little more detail right now. So I'm going to go through these really quickly here. Lily, best unit in the game right now, both PvE and one of the best units overall in PvP. Why? Well, because Crit is busted. Really quickly here, her S1, if a unit has the S2 up already with Twin Trick, well, they follow up every time Lily attacks and get a small turn meter boost. Her S2 also gives a speed boost to the entire team, and if the unit already has a Twin Trick, will give them a crit damage boost and give them a full turn meter push, which is really, really good. The S3, mainly used only for PvP, it can be set the skill cooldowns of both the animus skills and the shells by 1 turn, and at max level, well, it resets all skill cooldowns, which is really, really, really good. Even though this is really, really good, because of the lattice drought overall in the game, it is hard to justify leveling this up all the way. Even I don't have this leveled up. However, in PvP, most people will have the S1 and S2 up, the S1 being extremely important because that is a skill that has a speed buff on it, and you definitely want to get this assist rate up to 100% because that is what part of makes her really, really good. And eventually, too, you probably also want the S2 up simply because the 5% boost here for the initial Twin Trick and the skill cooldown to cycle more and more. So really, really strong. If you don't have Lily, 100% this is a unit that you want to get. Next we have Lilium, who is my favorite overall unit in the entire game, at least based on design. Her S3, it does massive damage and HP seals, which takes away the max HP of an enemy in PvP. It also gives her a speed and attack boost. In PvE, it has a final damage boost against bosses, which makes her the best, or at least one of the best, single target nukes in the entire game for speed clearing content like shells and thresholds. A little bit like not as good in longer content just because she's so squishy overall. Her S1 has a self heal on it, which is really good. It also makes her immune to crowd control, turn meter effects, and her passively she is immune to things like sleep, stun, forgetfulness, so any crowd control effects. So really good against high HP scalers and also against crowd control. Our S2 has a stun, which turns into AoE if it kills the target. This skill is a little bit less important because the AoE stun doesn't really come up that often in her fights. Maybe once every like 4 or 5 fights, I'll actually get this off with her. However, Lilium in PvP remains to be a top pick, one of the safest picks in the entire game. I think, in my opinion, yeah, extremely great character. Can't really go wrong with her if, again, you already have Lily. So, Doki Doki, one of the premier anti-crowd control units in the entire game. In PvE, she's pretty flexible. You can use her as like your 5th slot for a lot of different comps, just for a little bit of safety to clear those debuffs, everything like that. She is slower, but a little bit safer than Lily, in my opinion, in some compositions. Of course, as you get better and better gear, she becomes a little bit less necessary in PvE, but still a okay option there. In PvP, however, this is why a lot of people want her. Her S3 gets a special buff called Backup, which if a unit goes, she uses that backup to cleanse debuffs, which is really good. And her data stream increases the speed and damage that her allies can do, which is really good. Her S2 reduces skill cooldowns for faster skill cooldown usage. The S1 just gives some backup, stuff like that. Not really that great. However, because your S1 does have the speed on it, it means that you will level this up possibly first overall. But yeah, that's an extremely strong unit overall in PvP. In fact, a lot of crowd control players will pre-ban her, and if you have her, post-ban her. She's definitely a little bit harder to build because her base speed is kind of low, and she does require fast speed and specific setups to be used against crowd control. You can also use her, like, in more standard teams to fight against like bruises, stuff like that. However, that typically requires her to be on a slightly different build overall. But again, very strong overall in PvP and definitely usable in PvE. So next up, let's talk about Messiah. Now, people say, oh ho ho, Yelly, power cut Messiah. And in PvE, this is true for the most part. Messiah, before Yelly came out, was a unit people built to clear PvE content by himself. So maybe not as fast as other units, more specialized for certain content, but he can clear all unit overall. Yelly can do this too, but just better, because her kit is just more suited for PvE content. But in PvP, in my opinion, he is the best damage dealer for aggressive cleave comps in the game. And this includes being better than Yelly. I say better than Yelly, like they both have their strengths and overall weaknesses when you build it in damage. Now, Messiah's big bonus in cleave is that he ignores defense on his S3 by up to 70%, and he also ignores passives on it, which is really good. Because there are a lot of units in the, not a lot, I mean, there are a few units in the game that have really strong passives that just destroy Yelly cleaves. Hoyen is probably the prime example of this, where Hoyen versus Yelly, like the Hoyen team is just so strong against it. But because Messiah ignores Hoyen's passive, well, it's really good. This is why a lot of players in Cleave will actually have Messiah on their Ban Protect, just so that Hoyen is not a viable pick against them. So yeah, he does a lot of damage. He gives himself invincibility on the S3, which is really good, which he can extend with the S1. Like I said too, in PvE, still usable, and he will use him in PvE in content where you need like more units, like Cage Rumble, or things like the rally, where you need like a lot of teams and stuff like that. But yeah, but in PvP, premier cleave damage dealer in the game. So next we have Mio, which is going to be another unit focused primarily on PvP. Again, she is usable in PvE, however not necessarily amazing at anything. But PvP, why is she so good? Well, because of her massive crowd control capabilities. Her S3 has a huge turn meter manipulation, so it steals turn meter, so it takes away from theirs and gives them to you. Now, keep in mind that units that don't get pushed back or resist, so let's say they have high resist or immunity or just are immune like Lilium, well, they basically fully counter her, which is kind of annoying because sometimes you just run into teams that have like the setups against crowd control fully, and Mio is kind of really hard to use there unless you have something like, say, a Heinrich to go before her, which can be kind of difficult just because of like the speed tuning you want to do overall. Her S2 has AoE freeze and AoE wound, and AoE wound is really rare, right? Wound is not a common debuff to have, and it can really help against like healers and all that stuff, obviously. And of course, freeze is maybe the best debuff in the entire game, at least for a one-turner. And your S1 also has a freeze too. So yeah, just a really good crowd control character. A little bit harder to put into a draft overall, just because her counters are a little bit more obvious than some other units. However, in my opinion, if you are even in the draft with another player and you can pick Mio and she makes sense and relatively safe, you probably win that draft. And winning the draft means you are that much closer to winning your match. Okay, so the final PvP unit we'll talk about is going to be Heinrich. And when the game first started, overall, at launch, Heinrich was kind of laughed at because he's seen as a lackluster unit overall. However, as you get better gear and more people have been doing PvP, he has turned into quite the monster. One of the strongest overall, not the strongest overall, debuffer that doesn't have hard crowd control in the entire game. And why is this? Well, this is because his S3 has a multi-hit full strip with a buff block and a damage taken debuff also, which is really strong. Multiple hits means multiple chances to proc the debuff, which is really good. I should be said too that he's not useless in PvE. I do use him on some of my speed clears. However, in PvP is where he really shines. So besides that too, his S2 has a wound for 2 turns, which again, like I said before on the Mio little tidbit, that can be used to stop like healing from, say, a Tiamat. So at the setup, and you do your big cleave and everything, and the Tiamat goes into the Amber, well, if you had used wound on her beforehand, well, you know what? She doesn't heal from the Amber, and she just dies a little bit after that because of her passive. Her S1 will also give a small buff block for 1 turn on a single target, and also give 1 stack of the last word, which is going to be the damage taken debuff. So yeah, so a lot of bruiser and tank teams will pre-ban Heinrich because Heinrich basically dominates them overall if you're using a cleave comp. In fact, it is really hard for like those bruiser teams to fight cleave if they let like Heinrich up, which again is why he is pre-banned quite a fair bit. He's not an every time pick for your cleave class control comps. However, he is a really good option because of his, again, his overall synergy with those compositions. So if you are a faster player who just likes doing a lot of damage, he's also been used in one of the strongest offensive NPC, I say NPC, like AI arena compositions. Him, Yelly/Messiah, Lily, and Obel is like the, I call it like the God Cleave comp for AI arena. So he is using that too. So if you have those other units and you want to finish that composition off, he is a really good pick in that also. So finally we have Shadow Sanya, which I just realized on the screen here, it doesn't say Shadow Sanya, it just says Sanya, which I guess makes sense because she is just like corrupted Sanya. I guess. It's just kind of weird, right, that it only says Sonya to me. Anyway, out of all the units in the game, this is the one that I personally do not actually have, and so I probably will pick her up with my selector, even though I am tempted to skip her and just pick like a Lilium dupe. Um, Again, I probably will not do that. I probably still will get her just to have her in my collection. Now, Sonya is a pretty interesting unit overall in terms of her projections and where she is and the way she started. So she got nerfed pretty quickly at launch, which made people think that she started to suck. And then, as people started doing the content, they realized, oh, this content is actually really, really hard. And Sonya just kind of laughed at it. And holy crap, Sonya's busted, right? She's like a must-have for these players now. So her with Lily, Oval, and Vegas, because what Sonya does is that she basically amplifies dots and can detonate dots also, which makes her dot comps with her really, really, really strong, as dots do damage equal to max HP. So it just shreds through Terraton and Shadowflame Hoyan, which are the two main things you'll be using her for. She's also used for other more like, out there PvE, like Rally and stuff like that. But because Doki's AoE based, which is really not good there, what do you call it? They're just better teams for Aurora. Sharon and Rango, or I believe, I know Sharon's not immune, and Rango also, and on Inferno is also not immune, so not used there in those places. But in Terror and in Hoyan, really, really, really good. Now, the thing is, though, as people have gotten better gear and more units, the usage of Shadow Sonya has dropped off quite a bit. And I know some players who actually want to get their lattices, they put into her back now, because they don't use her anymore. Because they just have, like, not better teams, but, like, equal teams that don't use her. Which is why it's hard for me to recommend you take her, even though if you have Lily already, she will make your early game a lot easier. But in my opinion, she's a unit that is not typically necessary to have. Again, I don't have her, so this is my best chance to pick her up. So yeah, that's really my take on Shadow Sonya. Very strong unit for those two particular pieces of content, but again, not necessary to have. And one more time, this is a quick look at the tier list. Again, not really a tier list except for the top and bottom ones, where yes, you want to get Lily and you can't pick Yelly, and all of these overall based on what you want to do. Personally, I would recommend Lily, Doki, Lilium, and then any of these three here in any order. I would say that again, relatively equal, and then Shadow Sonya would be the one I recommend kind of the least, as she seems to be the least necessary overall. However, she is so bad in PvP that she might get buffed for it. I don't know, right? And again, unfortunately, we cannot get Yelly on the thing. Now, of course, if you don't really care about meta overall, just pick the unit that you like the most. You'll find much more enjoyment, I hope, with picking units that you actually want to have. Like me personally, I could have latticed up something like a Holden or a Tiamat, but instead, because of reasons, I decided to lattice up Hoyan instead. So to each their own. Anyway, if you like this video, I would greatly appreciate a like, comment, subscription, all the good stuff. Anyway, I'm Neptune. Till next time.